Welcome to Rambam In-Depth. Today we're going to be discussing the Rambam Hilchos Hakorbonos, Perik Ches, Halacha Yutes, and Halacha Chaf. The subject concerns a priestly garment which has the blood of a carbon chatas, of a sin offering, splattered on it, which the Torah requires washing in the courtyard. So the Rambam says, what happens? Beged shenitas olav dam chatas, v'yatza chutz la'azara. A garment upon which the blood of a sin offering was splattered, and before you had a chance to wash it in the courtyard, it was taken out of the courtyard. So what do? Very simple. Machziri la'azara mechapse shom. You bring it back into the courtyard and wash it there. However, nitma chutz la'azara keitzad yasa. What happens if it becomes ritually unclean outside of the courtyard, and you're not allowed to bring something that's tamei into the courtyard? So what do you do then? The answer is you have a way of making that which became tamei, that garment, no longer tamei. You could purify it. You rip it. By ripping it, you destroy its status as a vessel, and therefore it's no longer tamei, and you bring it inside and you wash it there. Okay. In Halacha Chav, the Rambam talks specifically about the me'il. Me'il is the cloak that the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, would wear. Shenita is olav dam chatas. It also has blood of a chatas sprinkled on it. V'yatza, and it also was taken outside. V'nitma l'chutz, and it became tamei outside. Keitzad hu'aisa. What do? What's the problem? So the Rambam himself says what the problem is. V'haraya kareya aisa leika. Someone who rips a me'il, a cloak, deserves the penalty of malchus, of lashes. As we explained in an earlier section in Hilchos Klei HaMikdash. So here you can't rip it because ripping a me'il is a crime in and of itself. So what do? Machnise pachas mishalosh etzbos umechavse b'fnim. You take the cloak and you bring it in piecemeal, one part of it less than 3 fingers worth, which makes it not susceptible to impurity, and therefore you're allowed to bring it into the azara, and you wash it there, and then you take another part until you wash the whole cloak. So the obvious question is, what's the difference between the cloak and all the other priestly garments? You're not allowed to destroy any of the priestly garments, and if you do that, it's also punishable by malchus, by lashes. So the Mishnah Lamelech brings from a sefer called Karban Chagiga, who says that in the case of the me'il, you are guilty for destroying it, even if you don't do it with the intention of destroying it. Just ripping it in and of itself is punishable. By contrast, all the other priestly garments, it has to be in a manner with an intent of destroying it. And this he bases on another Rambam in Hilchos Klei HaMikdash, Perik Tes Halacha Gimel, where he talks about the me'il, the cloak, and he says, Akireya pi ha-me'il leika. If you rip the mouth, the top of the me'il, where it goes over the neck, you get lashes. Shenema lo yikareya. It says in the Torah, you're not allowed to rip it. But then he says, V'hu adin l'chol bigdei kahuna. The same thing applies to all priestly garments. Shehakayra and derech hashchas aleika. That if you rip it in a manner of destructive manner, you're eligible for malchus. So the Rambam seems to make a distinction. When it comes to the me'il, any way you rip it, you are guilty. When it comes to other bigdei kahuna, it has to be with the intent of destroying it. And that's why we have a difference over here as well. The Mishnah Lamelech himself in Hilchos Klei HaMikdash doesn't explain why, but he disagrees with the Karban Chagiga, the Sefer Karban Chagiga. The Minchas Chinuch says that, in truth, there is no difference between the case of the me'il and the other priestly garments, and that any time you destroy it with the intention of destroying it, you're guilty. But the Minchas Chinuch says that the truth is that any time you rip a priestly garment in order to purify it, it is derech hashchas. It is considered a destructive manner. Why? Because why does it become tahar? Why does it become ritually clean by ripping it? The ripping destroys it. It's only because it has been destroyed. So who cares if you destroyed it with a positive intention later on in order to wash it? You had an intention to destroy it. So therefore, the Minchas Chinuch says any priestly garment would be included in this category, that you cannot rip it. You have to bring it in 3 fingers by 3 fingers, and wash it there. So then why does the Rambam make this distinction? When he talks about a garment other than the me'il, other than the cloak, he says you could rip it. So the Minchas Chinuch said he's not talking about priestly garments there. He doesn't mention the word priestly garments. He mentions the word just garment. Could be a garment that doesn't belong to the Beis Hamikdash. It could be a regular garment. In that case, there's no problem. There's a sefer called Marcheshes from a very great Rav in Vilna before the war. He was murdered by the Nazis, Hashem Yimkum Damai. And he says a very beautiful thing. He disagrees with the Korban Chagiga as well, and he says there is no difference between the me'il, the cloak, and other priestly garments. The difference between derech hashchasa in a destructive manner and not destructive manner has nothing to do with your intention, he says. It has to do whether you invalidated that garment. If you take a priestly garment and you rip it a little and it's hardly noticeable, says it doesn't invalidate it, it's still a kosher garment. That, I'm sure there'll be some who will disagree with that, but that's his premise. The me'il, he says, by definition, when you rip it, it becomes destroyed. Why is that? So he quotes the Rambam in the same place where the Rambam says the me'il had no sleeves. The me'il did not have sleeves. Unlike the kseinis, the shirt that a Kohen, every Kohen would wear, had sleeves that were sewn on, this did not have sleeves. And the Ravid says, how does he know that? Where did he get that from? So the Machesha says he got it from this distinction between ripping priestly garments and the ripping of the me'il. If you rip a priestly garment, it only becomes a crime if it invalidates it. But the me'il, the Rambam talks about ripping it at the mouth. If you rip it at the mouth, it invalidates it because the me'il was not sewn at the bottom. It was, in other words, it was like a cape. So the only thing that kept it together was what was at the top. And if that's ripped, it's no longer valid as a cloak. And therefore, by definition, ripping the me'il is a destructive thing. And therefore, he says, there's a very significant difference between the me'il and other garments. Because the me'il, any way you rip it in the mouth of the me'il, you are doing it in a destructive manner because it invalidates it. That's why you have to bring it in 3 fingers and no more. You can't rip it. Other garments, ripping it is not necessarily going to invalidate it. And he says this is the Rambam's source that the me'il had no sleeves. Because if it had sleeves, there's a simpler way of doing it. All you have to do is remove the sleeves, which was sewn on, and then later on you sew them back. It doesn't invalidate it. The fact that the Gemara, which the Rambam is basing himself on, says that you bring it in 3 fingers, and he doesn't give the solution of removing it by just taking off the sleeves and then reattaching them, that proves that the me'il did not have sleeves. So that way, there's no way you could accommodate the washing of the me'il unless you actually bring it in a little bit at a time.